We'll do a review in Likutei Siches in Chelek Chof Vov. This is volume 26. This is the second Sicha for the Parshas Pekudei. We're learning Leilu Nishmas, Rav Levi Yitzchok and Rabbi Chaim Tzvi, Leilu Nishmosei, B'toich Shnas of his passing. He was the dedicated, successful shliach of the Rebbe, and this should be to benefit his soul. Pekudei base. So this sikha, the Rebbe has something very surprising. In the beginning, the parsha tells you the details of how everything that was brought was counted by uh, Moshe Rabbeinu, and we learned also in the Sikha Aleph in Pekudei whether it was to know the total or it was an appointment from the to as Pekudei as an appointment to take charge. But the strange thing is that we only find an accounting of the silver and of the copper, and we don't find an accounting in the pasuk from the gold. So why, if it is made for people shouldn't suspect and that there was an accounting, there was a cheshbon over here, why is there only a cheshbon from the silver and the copper? Why is there no cheshbon for the gold? And not only that, not only the gold, there's other things that they counted in the from the material that they brought. But mainly we're concentrating on the gold over here. And the Rebbe brings down a commentary of the Kli Yakar that the gold was mainly used for the um, begodim, and a lot of it was used for the begodim. The garments had gold strands in them, and they were made from the gold. So, because we haven't learned yet in Vayakel, we only learned about the kalim, the vessels that they built in the Mishkan. So, as soon as we built the vessels of the Mishkan, they immediately took an accounting of how the money was spent. But then later on in the Parsha in Pekudei, it talks about how they constructed and made the Bigdei Kahuna, which they used as the gold. Some of the gold was used for the Bigdei Kahuna. They made the menorah was made out of gold, but some of the gold you had to give the cheshbon of the gold. You had to include the Bigdei Kahuna. But we hadn't learned yet about the Bigdei Kahuna, and we didn't wait for the cheshbon until you get to the Bigdei Kahuna. So basically, Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't give the cheshbon, he couldn't give the accounting of the gold until after the Bigdei Kahuna were done, how it was spent. So here he didn't wait for that. So as soon as the kalim were constructed, he went and he gave an accounting of the silver and also the copper from what it was constructed up till then. And then comes the garments of the kahuna. Frek the Kliyokar, so how come we don't find the pasuk that he gave them the accounting later on? Okay, he didn't want to give it here. At this point, he couldn't give the accounting of the gold because it wasn't yet done, all the gold. But later on, when he does tell them about the pasuk says that they made all the garments of the kahuna, they used the gold in there, what they used. Why doesn't it give you accounting over there? So here he gives like a very strange, not a strange, but a very interesting answer. But in the pasuk, we find as we read right in the beginning of Pekudei, it seems the pasuk says "Ve'eso elef ushva meyos v'chamisho v'shivim," that when Moshe Rabbeinu made the silver and he gave the cheshbon, he was stuck. He didn't know what else he was attributed to the Mishkan, but he was missing. He didn't have the cheshbon. So the pasuk goes and says Ve'es, eles, shvamis, v'chamishu, v'shivim shkolim, what they did. So the Medrash says that Moshe didn't remember, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu was later on test. The Eibishter said, "Oh, so this was actually not from Moshe Rabbeinu. This was the Eibishter saying that the Elef Ushva, the 1,775 shekels, what you did with that, that's what the Eibishter says in the pasuk. What they did, that wasn't Moshe saying. Oh, now the Yidden heard that the Eibishter himself is saying that Moshe Rabbeinu is trustworthy. Don't suspect him. So from that point on, Moshe didn't have to bring the gold anymore or give a cheshbon for the gold. If the Eibishter trusts him, the Eibishter himself said. So because the pasuk says that the Eibishter says that he's trustworthy, so therefore he didn't have to give an accounting of the gold. But the Rebbe says that's very difficult to understand because that announcement of the posik was actually made before the copper also, and still he gave a cheshbon of the copper. If it is because, so why did he have to give? If it's the announcement doesn't require a cheshbon, so why did he have to give a cheshbon for the copper? And why did the Eibishter make it also in such a way? We have to understand, the Eibishter made it that the silver and the copper, that he counted that. And either the Eibishter could have announced that Moshe is believed right in the very beginning, then he wouldn't have to give an accounting for everything. Or let him give accounting for the gold also. Why did the Eibishter make it in such a way that he's only announced that Moshe Rabbeinu is worthy at that point? This is all very difficult to understand. The Rebbe has a whole nother view about this. Rebbe explains that there was something special about this silver uh, and the copper that Moshe Rabbeinu needed. It needed to go to Moshe Rabbeinu.
Uh-huh.
What happens is this silver and the copper that the Yidden gave had to transfer to Moshe. They had to transfer. I put you on now, the Nalzach. You can respond. The silver and the copper that Moshe Rabbeinu used, they needed to have Moshe Rabbeinu presented to them, to him, to make it belonging to all the Yidden. The whole purpose, the Rebbe explains, we'll see at length how when the Yidden gave the gift, it was supposed to be the Yidden's gift to Hashem. And when the Yidden gave the gift to the Abish, to the Mishkan, so they gave it to Moshe. First to Moshe. When Moshe Rabbeinu received it, it's everybody. Moshe is the leader. He's the Nasi. He represents everybody. But then when Moshe gives it to the workers to do the work, to a certain extent, they gained ownership. In order for Moshe Rabbeinu to get back the ownership for Klal Yisrael, he had to count it to them. That had to be done for the silver and the copper, but the gold that was used also for the garments over there, the garments don't have that. Those are only for the keli because they're an atonement for the mix. The Rebbe will explain this, but we're going to go ahead and we'll learn inside weiter in the Sikha. Aleph. In der Tam, was mir gefindt in der Teure, by Meleches und Binyan HaMishkan. In the reasoning, why do we find in the Torah that when they did the work and building of the Mishkan, as Moshe Rabbeinu had gegeben a cheshbon, that Moshe Rabbeinu gave an accounting, was me hat gemacht von dem Kesef und Nechoshes, what was made out of the silver and the copper, von Nidvas HaMishkan, that was gifted to the Mishkan by the people. Aber nicht, was me hat gemacht von dem Zov. But it doesn't say that he gave, we don't find in the Pasuk that he gave a cheshbon from that which you made of the gold. Why don't we find the Pasuk telling you what they made out of the gold? The Rebbe mentioned in the previous Sikha that we learned that the other materials may not be so such substantial value over there. The Rebbe brought it down. The Rebbe didn't buy into that, but the Rebbe said this was just a sample, and that as the Rebbe spoke over there. But Bechlal, the Rebbe brought down that point that the other material weren't as expensive. But the gold, how come there is no mention of the gold? Zog der Kliyokor, the Kliyokor says, as wie Norm hat verendigt alle Malachas, as soon as they finished all Malachas HaMishkan, they did all the Bechlal, the general, Ubefrat, which means they did the structure, they built it, they built all the vessels, the Mizbeches and the Shulchan and the everything. Und alles, was man gedarft machen von Kesef and Nechoshes. Everything that you needed to make. In other words, the Kesef and Nechoshes has been done, accounted for, they've done everything they need to do. So at this point, he didn't want to wait any further to give any accounting of what did they do with the money, what did they do with the kesef, what did they do with the nechoshes. Is bichdei lahoitzi asatz v'menachshad, in order to take himself out of the suspicion, people shouldn't suspect. Hat Moshe noch eder hat gemacht die bigdei kahuna. So Moshe, even before they started making the garments of the kahuna, in welches is given zov, over there they used gold. So Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't give an accounting of the gold right away because the gold wasn't done yet. So he immediately gave an accounting of all the kesef and nechoshes that was used. Und hat nicht gewollt warten mit dem Cheshbon, bis man wird machen die Big Kahuna. He didn't want to wait with the accounting until they're going to construct also the garments of the Kahuna. Und erst dann geben dem Cheshbon von dem Zov zusammen mit die Kesef und Nechoshes. And then to give the accounting of the gold together at the same time he gives the accounting of the silver and the copper. For that he would have to wait till they finish what they did with the gold. That was also the garments of the Kahuna. He didn't want to wait. He gave it right away, so he can only give for the Kesef and Nechoshes. Why doesn't he give them later on the Cheshbon for the Kesef and Nechoshes? So, okay, he didn't want to do it then, but after he makes the kahuna, the big kahuna, why doesn't he give them a cheshbon? Und das, was hat nicht gemacht, kein cheshbon von Zov, takef noch ein gemar asi as big kahuna. And this, that he did not make the counting of the gold immediately after he finished constructing the garments. Now already he's done. Once he made the big kahuna, he's already done the garments of the kahuna as well. So why doesn't he give a cheshbon then? So he explained this based on the words of the Medrash. So the Medrash explains that Shabo Moshe Losis cheshbon al kol dover v'dover, when Moshe Rabbeinu came to give an accounting for each and every item, choser min hamishkol, from the weight of the silver, there was lacking 1,775 shkolim. There was 1,775 shekel was missing. He forgot. He didn't remember what he did from them. He didn't know what he did with them. Yotzo baskol v'omro. So a voice from the heaven, a baskol, came out and said, what did he do with the 1,705? Also vovim la'amudim. He made those hooks for the pillars, for the amudim. So for them, he made those hooks. L'kayim mashenemar. So this is to fulfill what the pasuk says about Moshe Rabbeinu. You don't have to worry about his honesty. Pasuk says, Loi Kain Avdi Moshe. My servant Moshe is not like that, not like everybody else. B'chol beisi nemon hu. He's believed in my whole home. I trust him. Aha. So after the pasuk says that Moshe Rabbeinu could not account for 1,775 silver shekels he couldn't account for. The Eibishter himself said, don't worry, he did. I'll tell you what he did. He made those hooks for the Brit. So now the Abishter said that he's trustworthy. So it came, we don't have any more problems. So now the Yidden didn't need any more Moshe Rabbeinu to tell them about the gold. Now the gold wasn't ready at the time. He didn't give them the cheshbon. So after he created the Big Day Kahuna, he didn't have to give a cheshbon. So even though this was what the Eibishter told him about the silver pieces, but once the Eibishter said about the silver pieces, he had a free pass. The Pasuk doesn't have to tell us anymore, giving an accounting. Dos haste, which means Af al pi ados vos der Baskoil hot edus gesagt. Even this that the Baskol testified, Vesa Elif. It only is given wegen Kesef, Nizov. That was talking about the silver, the extra silver that he couldn't account for. Wie bald aber as Eden haben gesehen, since the Eden saw, as min hashamayim is men made of Moshe, that from the heavens they testify in Moshe, haben sie schon nicht gedarft haben a cheshbon of Mizov. They no longer required an accounting for the gold. The Eibishter believes him, so that's why there's no accounting for the gold. This is what the Kli Yakar explains. So lechatchila he couldn't give for the gold because the gold wasn't ready. The Torah doesn't tell you what they made it. So they finished building the Mishkan. He doesn't want to wait till he'll finish all the garments and then give a cheshbon. So he gives the cheshbon, whatever they use, the gold and the silver and the copper. And then he waits for the gold for the construction of the Big Dekuna, but he has no need now to go ahead and tell them what's the amount that they used up for the Big Dekuna together with everything else. Why? Because in the meantime, the Eibush has already said, I trust Moshe v'chol beisi nemanu, and the Eibush tells us that there's no point, so he didn't have to tell him anymore. The Rebbe said that beer is over nitglatik, it's not smooth, vile. Because this testimony says before, number one, before it says he gave the cheshbon for the nechoshes, for the copper. If you don't have to give a cheshbon because the Eibishter says that you believe him, so why did he have to go and give a cheshbon from the copper? It's number one. Number two, the Rebbe will say, why did the Eibishter orchestrate it in such a way that you shouldn't give a cheshbon from the gold and you need to give a cheshbon? That means something. Aleph. The Werter Vesa Elf Shva Meir is Goimer was the Baskolot gesagt. That words that Elf Shva Meir that they made the hooks for the pillars from them, that was testified by the Baskol wegen dem Cheshbon from Kesef, stehen in Posik. That's written in the Posik. Lifnei dem Cheshbon, before the Cheshbon von Nechoshes, before copper. Is Kishem vi Moshe hat noch ein Baskel. Just like Moshe after the Baskel, nit gedarft geben a cheshbon. He did not have to give an accounting von dem Zohar, from the gold. Also hat euch nit gedarft geben dem cheshbon von the choshes. So likewise, you should have not given the accounting of the copper either, because it says the announcement that the Eibishter says, I trust him, which you're using as a reason for not giving an accounting for the gold. He shouldn't give accounting for the copper either, because this pasuk is before he gave the copper. So he's already testified about him, the Eibishter. So why does he have to give? Why does the pasuk tell us about the copper? Beis, either way. If there was a baskel, in order to let us know from the heavens, as Moshe Nemanu, that Moshe is believed, is those given in an Eifel. Why was the Baskel coming away as man? As soll versprochen zu geben nach Cheshbon nor from Zov. It was only made so that he should save himself, not to have to give accounting only from the gold. So why did the Eibishter make that Baskel only tell us that he shouldn't have to give a cheshbon for the gold? Und nicht this man kozeh, and not in a time, soll ein ganzer nicht darf geben kein cheshbon. He should at all not have to give a cheshbon. The Eibishter could have orchestrated it, that he's believed, so he doesn't give a cheshbon altogether. Why did the Eibishter have to wait for that? Euch nicht von the kesef und choshev, not from the silver, not from the gold. Share klap ishmaya gal yav vet choshev sein. Since before Hashem it was revealed that people will suspect him and that he'll have to give an accounting, so the Eibishter could have intervened lechatchila and Moshe Rabbeinu's behalf instead of waiting for later on. So that proves to us it's more than that. It's not just that this was a suspicion. There was something that Moshe Rabbeinu needed to count the copper and the silver because that was a necessary component of the Mishkan, and that's the way to really fulfill the building of the Mishkan properly. That it has to go through Moshe Rabbeinu needs to count the silver and the copper, but Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't need to count the gold that goes into the Big Dezov. The Big Dezov, the garments are different than the Mishkan and the Kalim, as the Rebbe will continue to explain why it was important for Moshe Rabbeinu once again to go ahead and bring about the counting and that way transform it back into the property of all the Yidden. So the Rebbe explains now by first asking, why does as soon as it says Eile Pekudei HaMishkan, before he starts doing the counting, it throws in again who built the Mishkan, that it was Betzalel and Achisamach. Why does the Torah uh, have to say this over here? What's the point? Now, the Rebbe brings down that the Mefarshim say that this is to tell us that they did, because it says in the pasuk Tziva Hashem es Moshe, even if Moshe didn't tell the work Betzalel and Eliyav what to do, they already figured out. They knew what Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, that's why there's a repetition. But why stick it in after the Elipkudah? There's meaning to that. The Rebbe will lead that there's a special purpose for Moshe's counting. Let's look inside. Beis v'yesh leimer. As Pekudei HaMishkan asher pukat al pi Moshe, when it says the Pekudei Mishkan that was counted by Moshe, that Moshe instructed, and the counting of the person, but is nit stam given a cheshbon. No, it's just to give an accounting. Nor sees negeya to them etzem inyan hamishkan. But that is important to the whole idea of the Mishkan. We need to count this. The Pekudei is important to counting. How do we see that? L'cheire, parvos chazer do iber the Torah nochamo betchilas haparsha. Why does the Torah repeat it in the beginning of the parsha? Gleich noch dem ersten Pasuk, after the first Pasuk, Eile Pekudei Mishkan, asher pukat api Moshe, the summer, ben Aaron HaKohen, avodas haLevim. It's right away. Is the second pasuk. It says Betzalel ben Nuri ben Chur lamata Yehuda osers kol asher tziva Hashem es Moshe. So that Betzalel from the tribe of Yehuda, the son of Uri, son of Chur, made everything which Hashem told Moshe. And together with him was Achisamach from the tribe of Dan. Was a Chorov v'Choshev. Why does the Torah tell us right in the beginning? Man weiß doch schon von Freier, als seine gewähnte Malach. We know from before that they were the ones that did the work. So, okay, now, the Farshim explained that there is a purpose for this. Leut mit Rosh Razal und Azoyech leut Pirush Rashi. And also Rashi, kum the Torah do losen, wissen what the Torah is coming to let us know, it teaches. As also Skola Shetziva Hashem es Moshe. The pasuk specifically says that he did which Hashem told Moshe. It doesn't say that which Moshe told Betzalel. It says that Betzalel and the Eliyav did everything that Hashem told Moshe. Asher tziva yisrael Moshe engsikan. It doesn't say. Rashi says that what Moshe told you, what Moshe told him, it doesn't say Elokol Asher tziva Hashem es Moshe, that he did what Hashem told Moshe. Afilu dvarim shaloi amar le Moshe. Even those items that Moshe didn't tell him, Moshe Rabbi, in his own mind, he came up in his mind to what Moshe was told by Sinai. So he did what Hashem told Moshe, even though Moshe may have not told it to him. So that's the pasuk. But we still don't understand. So does darf l'chayra haber haben as born this still requires additional explanation. Pavosh state those to vision them pasuk. These are the countings or the appointment for the Mishkan. The count over the Moshe That's the pasuk starts off with, and then you smack in the middle, and then on the cheshbon. We're starting to say what was the Pekudei Mishkan, was the cheshbon kol azov goyver v'kesef Pekudei ha'edah, the gold, all this gold that came in, and the kesef Pekudei ha'edah, and then goes the cheshbon from there. So whatever the so Gedavstein oder Freyer, it should have either said before to tell us that what Bezalel did was something which Hashem told Moshe, even though Moshe didn't tell him. So Parshas Vayakil, that's what it should be written. Oder noch die Psukim, or after the verses, wo es wird gegeben, der Cheshbon von dem Zauber Chesed von der or after those verses in which there is the accounting, how much gold and copper came in. We don't have how the silver, the gold was distributed. We have know how much gold, silver, and copper came in. So the pasuk should have said after that that Moshe, that Betzalel and the Holiav did everything that Hashem told Moshe, because they found out why does it come in between Elip Pekudei and the amount of Kol Hazov, when the Torah tells us how much the gold and the silver that came in. And the Rebbe is going to answer this, which will also answer our question. The Rebbe is going to explain that this is precisely what the Torah wants to say, that even though Betzalel and Oliov, they are the one that built it all, they sort of took the gifts that were given to Moshe, and Moshe gave it to them, and they built it sort of, they put their stamp on it as theirs. They had to give it back to Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem Pukad, that Moshe Rabbeinu should make it back into the possession of the Yidden. And the Rebbe will later say that this is only important by the Mishkan and the Kalim and not by the Begodim, as the Rebbe will continue to explain later on. So what's the explanation? The Rebbe says we can say the Mishkan had gedarf sein shaykh zu Klal Yisrael. The Mishkan needed to be connected to all of Eden, to Jewish people, to all Eden. Werd angerufen bereish Parsha Seinu. It is referred to in the beginning of our Parsha, Mishkan Ha'edus. It is a Mishkan that is a testimony. Edus li Yisrael. This is a testimony for the Jewish people. Sheviter lehem HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Maisa Ha'egel. That Hashem has forgiven them for the act of the Egel. The testimony is the Mishkan Sharei Hishra Shchinase B'nei, because he rests his divine amongst them. That is the evidence. That is the proof that the Eibishter has forgiven them, has forgone, was mevater, because he gave them the Mishkan. So the Mishkan is the purposes for all Yidden to testify about them. Und in the Dovis von alle Yud Gimel Tes Vav Dvarim, whether it's 13 or 15, depending on how we interpret it, but the gifts that we're talking about that the Yidden gave, they needed to be given over in such a way as is only in ganzen belangen zum Zibur, that they should completely belong to the community. The people, individuals gave it, but they gave it in such a way that it totally transferred to the community. Nicht bleiben shaykh zu Hayochid, not to remain connected to an individual. Und das ist geworden durch them, and that became, how did this happen from individuals becoming the community? That became through this was not als gebracht zu Moshe Rabbeinu. Everything was brought to Moshe Rabbeinu. Was is given der Nossi Kol Yisrael. He was the leader of all of it. Weil Yideze is the ganze Trumme, was Yidden haben gebracht, geworden nicht Zitzibur. So through this, the entire separation that the Yidden brought became assets of the community. Okay, so that's the way he became community asset. Now what happens? The Acharei, But after the Moshe hat abgegeben den Nidvas HaMishkan zu Bezalel v'Oliav, after Moshe gave the gifts of the Mishkan to Bezalel and Oliav, Kol ish chacham lei, even to all wise of heart, if zu tamid in Nidavis the Alam Lachas HaMishkan, that they should do with these gifts that people gave, they should do all the work of the Mishkan. So once you gave it to them, especially the Rebbe says, they get sort of an ownership over there. The Tzalel and Ahali of the workers, the craftsmen that are building the Mishkan. Especially the Rebbe says in Tim Tzaleimar, if you're going to say as that they didn't take pay for their reward, which the Rebbe references over here about this idea, the Panim Yofis, but but since they are making it bakumen, they got sort of an ownership of the work of the Mishkan. How is that? Vibald as Shema Umnin al Hamalocha. It's the name of the craftsman is on the work that they do. So it's their work, it gets their name, it became associated with them. Chotsch, es ist nicht den ganzen gegangen vom Bailus so Zibur. Although he hasn't completely left the ownership of the community. That's a question. When you hire somebody and the person is craftsman, does he get to own the item until he's paid back for it? But without that, what the Rebbe says, it didn't totally leave the ownership of the community, but still the name, there was a connection to the builders, the ones to the person. The Farod Gedarf Zain, Pekudei HaMishkan Goymer HaShapukat Al Pi Moshe. When Moshe Rabbeinu were counting all this, noch dem v'Betzalel haben and etc. Betzalel v'Chulu and Oliav and the rest of them haben verendigt the Melachas HaMishkan. They've concluded the work of the Mishkan. Had gedarft zayin ha'peula, there needed to be another act, the Pekudei minyan durch Moshe Rabbeinu. The counting, the number, through Moshe Rabbeinu. In the Alam Melachas HaMishkan, in all the work of the Mishkan, as is only in ganzen zayin nichse HaMishkan, so they should be entirely the assets of the Mishkan. After the construction was made by the Betzalel, Liav, etc., that we should bring it to Moshe, and then it becomes back the assets, becomes back a Mishkan, Velchet is Edus Yisrael, which is a testimony for the Yidden Klal Yisrael. Their mit, by doing that, hat man sie herausgenommen von der Sheiches. That way you took them out from their connection to their connection, was hat sich geschaffen durch Asiyas, Betzalel, Liav, Chachmei Lev. That was a connection that was created when Betzalel, Liav, and all the that they should become entirely assets of the community. That was done through Moshe Rabbeinu again counting them. And then there's an additional yin. So first of all, by counting it again, that's the way they once again transferred it to become totally Mishkan. As the Rebbe was saying, that was necessarily by the Mishkan, specifically the Mishkan. The Mishkan needed to be Klal Yisrael versus the gold, which also went for the Begodim, as we'll see. Another idea, it wasn't just enough just to have assets of each part and part needed to go through. Not only their sanctity as assets of Hekdesh in general, needed to do to Moshe Rabbeinu, but also the specific idea which every detail was made, but gedarft sein durch Moshe Rabbeinu needed to be through Moshe Rabbeinu. Und das hat sich aufgetan durch der Pekudei al pi Moshe. That was accomplished. Asher pukad al pi Moshe, that the counting that was taking place through Moshe. Le'acharei avodas shebetzalel v'chulu. After that, Betzalel did the avodah. So that's why the Torah places it over here. When the Ribber is the Torah mafsik und zot, gleich noch ein Posik. The Torah interrupts immediately after the verse. Eila pekuda mishkan gema shapukad al pi Moshe. That this was counted by Moshe. Die zwei Pesukim of Betzalel goymer, ve'ito Eliyav goymer. So the Torah brings in these two Pesukim. Eider ziret wegen dem Cheshbon, before from Kol Azov, goymer and dem Cheshbon from Kesef Nechoshe, before talking about all the accounting. Der mit is Musber der Teuchen von in dem Zeurach von der Pekudei Shalpi Moshe. That's we understand the necessity of being counted by Moshe. So because Ito Eli, he says Pekudei, then it tells you Ito Eliyav. And the reason they need to count it is because it was now went over to the domain from the war craftsman. And we need to bring it back to become Nichse Hegdesh. So the Rebbe explains now in Ois Daled, while the Mishkan and the Kalim needed to be sort of re-owned again by Moshe Rabbeinu through his Pekudei to become the Klal Yisrael, this only applied to the Mishkan and the Kalim, but not to the Begodim. The Begodim were an independent activity outside of the Mishkan. That's why the Begodim actually were done after the Mishkan. And as the Rebbe will explain, you can't have Begodim, or you can't make a kohen if there is no place where they can serve. So there needs to be first a Mishkan. So this takes place after, independently. And since the Begodim are not in the purpose like the Mishkan, Edus, Mishkan or Edus. So while we need the Begodim to belong to Klal Yisrael, but we don't have that counting a second time that Moshe should turn them in to make them into belonging to the Klal. We don't find that over there because it's not a Mishkan Edus. Those are garments for a Kohen. Dalet. Das als is benegeet to Meleches HaMishkan. All this that we need to see to it is that it belongs back to the Klal, is as it goes by the Meleches HaMishkan. Benegeya aber zu Bigdei Kahuna, but when we do talk about Bigdei Kahuna, this is something different than Meleches HaMishkan. Gefitmen as gleich b'shas hatzivul Moshe, immediately when Hashem told Moshe wegen the Bigdei Kahuna, about the garments of the Kahuna, so it says va'ato hakrev elecha, you bring close to you Aaron Achicha, the Kohanim. Zokt Rashi la'acharei shetigmor meleches hamishkan, after you finish meleches hamishkan. Basically, there's meleches hamishkan. Then after you do that, then ato hakrev elecha. Das heißt, the Bigdei Kahuna v'asiyosam, the garments of the Kahuna, making them and making the God was durch Bigdei Kahuna verde lekachi lechani li von Aaron Ubonov, and these Bigdei Kahunas, through them, that serves the way how you sanctify to make them for Kohanim, for me, from Aaron Ubonov. Is nit be'emtza. It's not part. It's not in the middle of the construction. It's la'acharei shetigmer. So it's not part of it. Oder bechlal von Meleches HaMishkan. It's not part of Meleches HaMishkan. Zeyer Asiya Darv Zayin Davke, they need to specifically be made la'achar shetigmer Meleches HaMishkan, after the Meleches HaMishkan is made. It is not the same what applies to the Mishkan, and to repossess it and everything. It has nothing to do. The Kahuna, Bigdei Kahuna, is its own matter. And why does it say, not separate, it says after you finish? It's not just a separate, this is separate, but it says after you finish. The Rebbe says explains that you can't have Kohanim to be sanctified if you don't have a place of Kahuna. Service, there has to be first a base Mishkan before you can make the Kohanim. I could say the specific in this matter, the Chalois HaKedusha fun Lecha Ne'li B'Mishkan. In order to wrest this sanctity, to become a Kohen, to serve me in the Mishkan, how does this can sein nor? It can only take place when sis dode mitzias, once there exists fun an ort wo es can sein b'shachanti. There's a place where there could be resurrection. Ubemela vert efsharis hametzias fun lechane li fun kohuna. There is a possibility for such a exist to serve me fun kohuna l'shadus. Erst damut ken sein lekache. Then you can sanctify lachnise bekohuna idam godim. Then you can bring him into the kahuna through garments. If there is a place, Lee, where the Kohen can serve, then you can bring him. But before it doesn't exist, there's no place to serve. So then there is no such a category as a Kohen and the sanctity of a Kohen of Mishkan. So after you complete and you create the Li, a place of a Mishkan, that's when we can create the Kohanim to serve me. And also the part becoming a Kohen, also putting on the garment, was his aprat and his mashtam, which is a detail and completes their being Kohen. That's as far as the Kohen and dressing them up. And this is for making a Kohen can only be after there's a Mishkan. The same thing is creating even the garments of the Kohen. Similarly, is also as it relates to making of the garments. When could there be an existence of making the garments of Kahuna? Is after it exists, the end, the work of the existence of a Mishkan. You need a Mishkan first, then you can make garments that will be served in the Mishkan. The Kohen cannot be until there's a Mishkan. The same thing is the garment. That's why the Pasuk says, the Rashi says befedish before, so then you create those garments to serve me. Oh, so now that we know that these are separate and later, and it's its own category, it's not part of the Melechus HaMishkan. So now we'll understand why here it wasn't necessary for Moshe to. It's not the Mishkan. It's not why it wasn't necessary for Moshe to be counting those things, like it was necessary for the Kelo of the Mishkan. Why did it not have to need to also between on the part of the gold was von imot megemacht the big dekona, the part of the gold that was made the big dekona that you didn't need to count. Der Teuchen, I guess, and to count just the gold that they did for the Menorah or something that they didn't need to do. I got to look at the Horus. But the Teuchen of Ulas, that's what the Rebbe says, dem Chelek Hazov, was von imot megemacht the big dekona. I guess if you don't count that, you can't count the gold because, and you don't need Pekudei for that. The Teuchen of Ulas Pekudei HaMishkan is Kamshach HaKos. What is the idea, the contents? What is the act of counting of the Mishkan? Is Kamshach HaKos, well, it is Mishkan HaEdus, because it's a Mishkan of testimony. Kinal Edus LiYisrael, it's a testimony for the Yidden, Shevitar Lahem HaKodesh Baruch Hu, Maisa Egel, that the Eberster has forgiven them, for the act of the Egel. That's why we have the Mishkan. That's the Edus. Ubemele is Negeya, and therefore it's important as Blachas HaMishkan, in welche Isha Shchinosi, that the work of the Mishkan in which Hashem rests is Shechina, that construction and the gifts, so Zaina Hegdish, that should be a Hegdish, such a sanctity was is a ganzen Shaykh L'Klal Yisrael, which entirely belongs to the Jewish people. On Kenshu Shaykhs to Yechidim Shabi Yisrael should have no connection to individuals. I feel in it Shaykhs do Chasidus Avlochina. We don't even want it to be connected to individuals because they did the work. Canal before. We had to bring it to Moshe after they did it to take away sort of their ownership. We don't want it. We want it to be connected because this is a testimony for the vindication of the Jewish people. So we want it to be for all Jewish people. Nobody has any hold on it more than all of Klal Yisrael. Mashenkin the big dekun as opposed to big tun of a say and need kin chelek from lachas hamishkan or negayot of the garments of the kahuna are not part of the Mlachas HaMishkan. This is after the Goan. That's important for the service of the Kohanim. Is Choch Bazei is their din. Although the halacha is, can't have it belonging to anybody. It needs to belong to the community. As they darfun zayin from moment sibur, they must be money of the community. Is aber in them nitod the hadgoshe, but they don't have the emphasis as is all nit hoben. Can shum shayches to the isam locha. Don't have that emphasis. They should have no connection to those who did the work. So it doesn't matter. Because there, the entity of the garments, the entity of the Big Day Kahuna, is not, they're not a part of the Mishkan Ha'edus, Melechas HaMishkan. It's not part of the Mishkan, and therefore over there we don't need to be counted again by Moshe to take it away. And the Rebbe says this also explains and sweetens the idea that by the Mishkan, they brought everything to Moshe. But by the gold and the tchelis which they used for the garments, says they took. They didn't have to bring it to Moshe. We didn't have to, because to begin with, it didn't need to repossess it or need to give it again, but they did even the first time they didn't give it to Moshe Rabbeinu. But there is a difference in also the gift. By Nidvas HaMishkan steht, as man hat das alles gebracht zu Moshe. The gifts of the Mishkan says they were all brought to Moshe because over there they needed to go to Moshe to become everyone's, totally everyone's, because this is a edus, it's Vitterland, Klal Yisrael. Betzalo live und kolish chacham live, and then Betzalo live and all chacham live. Those genommen milif name Moshe. We took it from Moshe, so everybody brought it to Moshe. Mashein came them zov and tcheles was mit gemacht the big kahuna, as opposed to the gold and silver, the gold and the tcheles that they made the big kahuna. Chosh das is given mit truma mukadeshes lishmi. Although that also came from the truma mukadeshes lishmi. As Rashi in Tetzaveh said, the Li, that it should be for the Hebrews and Kodesh, but how did they get zokt over the Pasik? Vehem yikchu es azov. Who is they shall take the zov? You don't bring it to Moshe, but Haim, who is Oisum Chachma Lev, Shiyasab Godim, Yikablu Minam Isnadvim, they will take it directly from the gifters as Azov, as Atchelas, the gold and the Tchelas, Lasis Memes Abgodim, to make the Begodim, which means that they didn't bring it to Moshe. They went and they took it directly from the people, the Zov and the Tchelas that they needed. Why? Because this wasn't an Edus to forgiven. It didn't have to be Klal Yisrael. And the Rebbe brings down on another point, another Inyan now, that Moshe Rabbeinu really needed to do this, not just because Moshe Rabbeinu was the representative of all Yisrael. He wanted to be everyone's. But Moshe Rabbeinu also was the only one who had no connection to the Egel because he was on the mountain. He couldn't stop them. He wasn't even there at all. So therefore, everybody else had some sort of a connection to the Egel. It had to come through Moshe sort of rejecting the oil that the Egel, which is the testimony of the Mishkan. And that's why it was all done by Moshe, but that was necessary when we talk about the Mishkan Ha'edus and not by the garments. Let's see how you say. Apia Nalvet Atoisus Biur, based on the above, would also add an additional explanation. Pavos der Inyan hat sich aufgetan al Yidei Moshe Davke, why this was accomplished only through Moshe. This idea that it needs to be public money that the Rebbe says, but why was it done Davke through Moshe? Afal Pi, as the Inyan from Moshe to the Tzibur Yofe Yofe, that when you give something, an individual to the community, and you get it mixed in it very well, which means it becomes everyone's. Bechlal is the choichve megit up the zach to a gizbrok is when you give it. Also, when you give it to an attendant, it's similar. It doesn't have to be Moshe Rabbeinu. Any representative of the community makes it everybody's. Over here, we wanted Moshe Rabbeinu shapukat api Moshe. Why Moshe? Das ist nicht nur mitzad dem Inyan HaNesiyas Shel Moshe. It's not just because Moshe was the leader, so he presented everybody. He represented everybody. Nor euch mitzad dem, was Moshe mitzad Atzmei hat nicht gedarft ankommen zu der Kapore Shal der Mishkan. That Moshe on his own did not need to come on to an atonement from the Mishkan. This Mishkan that was made as an atonement, the only one who didn't need an atonement really is Moshe. As spoken in the past, as Moshe is given that einzigen, that Moshe was the only one that had no connection, God forbid, to the sin of the Egel. He didn't even have, sometimes there's a connection because you can protest. He couldn't protest. He wasn't even there. Hat nicht gedacht ankommen to the meaning from Mishkan Edus. He didn't really, for himself, he didn't need the testimony to forgive him because he didn't do anything. Edus li Yisrael shevit. What is the Edus? Sheviter lehem HaKadosh Baruch Hu ma'aseh egel. The Eibishter is forgone for them, for they made the egel. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't need it. He didn't make an egel. Und der Rebbe, and therefore, alle andere Iden, all other Iden, mitzad dem, was sie gemusst ankommen zu Mishkan lekapore, they needed the Mishkan as an atonement. Wer durch Seyeris askus basis Mishkan, when they are doing and working and building the Mishkan, ashaychus von the dvorim shenasu al yodem mitzeh. There is a connection with the things that are made through them with them. There is samlocha, those who are doing the work, because they have a connection to that. So somehow they have a personal connection because they were also part of it. Ubemela fell down in the shlemus von Hegdish al Nichtzibur. So therefore, it's lacking in the wholesomeness of Hegdish that it's assets of the community. In order that there should become assets of the community completely, even after they did it, this needed to be done specifically through Moshe. Vayaviu as a Mishkan, Bizas Oicha Kamos is given to Moshe Davke. Also, raising it was through Moshe. It all had to go back because you don't want it. The people, individuals working with it had a connection. They needed atonement, but we wanted to be fully. It had to be through Moshe because Moshe had no connection to this. Bizas Oicha Kamos is given to Moshe Davke. Also, the way they raised it was through Moshe. Vayaviu as a Mishkan al Moshe Gomer. But alles gebracht zu Moshe. Everything was brought to Moshe. Davke al Yodei is aufgestellt geworden der Mishkan. And specifically through Moshe, the Mishkan was raised. He raised the whole Mishkan. The gifts were brought to him. He was counted them. And then he raised the Mishkan because he is the only one that had no connection. So nobody grabbed hold of any connection. They brought it back to Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu raised the Mishkan. But this only applies to the Mishkan. This doesn't apply to the Bigdei Kehuna. So that's why over here he needed to pukad, needed to count it, as opposed to the Bigdei Kehuna. He didn't need to count it.